All right, welcome back to the regular school committee meeting of the Attleboro School Committee, Monday, June 8th, 2020. Our first item on the agenda of our open meeting tonight is an Eagle Scout presentation by Jacob Connors. And he's going to present a presentation about a playground renovation that he's done for his Eagle Scouts. And so we look forward to hearing what he has to say and thank him for his work. So Jacob, feel free to take it away.
All right, hello everyone.
Hello.
All right, do you want me to share screen so the presentation is visible?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, cool. I'm setting it up real quick. And should be available right now. Is everyone seeing this?
It's there, yeah.
All right, cool. So let's get into the present. So, hello, I am Jacob Connors, a Life Scout from Troop 25 Attleboro, Massachusetts. And today I am proposing my Eagle project of updates and improvements to the Peter Thatcher School elementary playground. Why I chose to do this project, the ELC program at Thatcher Elementary was amazing for me when I was a kid and amazing for my family when I was a kid. They helped shape who I am today, and I decided to give back to the program by improving their playground. I have already met with the principal and assistant principal of the school to discuss the project. I've also been in contact with the ELC staff to come up with a list of improvements and updates that can be done for the project. And I have done a walkthrough of what needs to be done with the facilities manager of Attleboro Public Schools. And my project will include the following: construction of a walking path that encircles the inside of the ELC playground, repairing and replacing elements of the playground equipment, including the purchase of 2 new alligator seesaws, spreading wood chips in the playground, and adding an adapted swing to the current swing set, replacing sand for the standing sandboxes, removing outdated ground sandbox, installing a small plastic shed to store toys and other items, building sensory boards along the path for students to use, and installing a previously bought balance beam. And these are the following materials that will be provided by the facilities manager. Of course, as I already mentioned, the balance beam, it has already been purchased but has not been installed yet. Wood chips are actually a yearly maintenance expense that the scouts will provide labor to spread in the playground. And materials for the walking path will be provided, and decision is pending discussion of appropriate materials with the ELC therapist. My estimated cost for the project is around $1,400. This includes the adapted swing, storage shed, painting supplies and rust treatment materials, sensory board materials, replacement seesaws, and sanitizers and cleaning equipment for the site. My anticipated project timeline is to obtain approval of you guys, the school committee, in June. Then complete my Eagle Scout workbook, also in June, and present the project to my mentor and Troop 25 committee as well in June. Then for around July and August, I plan on submitting the Eagle Scout workbook and project plan to Narragansett Council for approval. And upon approval, I want to begin fundraising for supplies and equipment. And I will schedule work and begin the project in August and possibly early September. Of course, we have to deal with the pandemic because that is one big issue right now. People on the site will be wearing PPE, masks, gloves, etc. Scheduled shifts will be limited to a small number of participants working on independent tasks to avoid any possible, contamination and stuff. Social distancing protocols will be maintained on the worksite to ensure safety of all participants, and hand sanitizer will be made available on the worksite, and tools and equipment will be disinfected after each use between shifts. And thank you for your time. Is there any questions? Mr. Storrs.
Hey, Jacob. As a former Scoutmaster, I fully unaware how much time and effort it's taken you to get to this point. So congratulations to be here before us. I understand, I grew up in scouting, so and my son has been in scouting, Eagle Scouts. So I understand the passion, and it's part of who you are. So I commend you. This project is a great one. A lot of elements, a lot of work. The big one that I'm wondering is, $1,400, especially during a pandemic, not low money by any means. Can you speak to what your plan is regarding fundraising? How you plan to raise those funds?
Okay. I plan on fundraising possibly through a GoFundMe if Scouts allows it, and also reaching out to companies, seeing if they would make donations, and of course through family and friends and the scouting family and friends as well, see if they will donate.
Okay, all right, that's a good answer.
Any other questions for Mr. Connors? Yes, Mr. Geddes.
Jacob, I wanted to echo Mr. Storrs' comments of congratulating you on getting this much work to get to this point. And I'll extend it by saying it's always exciting to see alumni, especially of our younger levels, step up to improve the environment for current students. So thank you for paying it forward and paying it back at the same time. And we look forward to seeing a great result at the end. Good luck.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you so much. So Jacob, not so much a question as just a comment that I am really impressed with the thoughtfulness that you've put into this project. The fact that you're considering the sensory boards, the fact that you're working with the ELC therapists to make sure that the project includes things that they feel are going to be most appropriate. Just really great job of taking your time and thinking things through. So, and again, to echo Mr. Geddes' comments, thank you so much for giving back to the Thatcher ELC. That's a great group, and we do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Storrs.
Thank you. Jacob, can I ask how old you are?
I am 17.
Okay. The reason I ask is, the age out requirement for Scouts being 18, being in the pandemic, and I've seen how council is sometime with how long it takes for them to approve a project. Can you tell me how much time you have before your 18th birthday?
I have up until February 17th.
All right. So it sounds like you got plenty of time. So no concerns there. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Larson.
Jacob, congratulations for getting to this point. Good luck on your project. And when you get to the fundraising part, don't forget to reach out to us.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Domenici.
Thank you. And Bill, thank you for saying that. I wanted to echo that and just make sure it was appropriate here. Jacob, proud of you for the work you put together. Thatcher is homeschool for my children through elementary. I still have a student there, though not in the ELC. I think it's just a good thing that you're doing for a group that's most appreciative, and the thought put into it is impressive, as Shannon mentioned. And again, to echo Bill, when the time comes for you to start that fundraising, you can give Ward 6 a call, because I'll be happy to assist in any way I can.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Sawyer. Oh, sorry, Mr. Rooney. Go ahead. You had a comment?
I just wanted to congratulate Jacob as well on such a well thought presentation, and it's a great reflection of the high school that you want to give back. So congratulations, bud.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rooney.
Mr. Sawyer, is there any concerns or steps from the administration's point of view before the school committee votes to approve this project?
Anytime that we are doing work in the schools with volunteer work involved in it, that's something that we have to go through a careful process. But Jacob has certainly been a very responsible participant in that, and we will continue to work with him to make sure that everything goes the way it needs to go, and that both Thatcher and Mr. Connors here benefit from the experience.
Thank you. All right, so then at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the proposed renovation and improvements to the Thatcher Elementary School playground as set forth in Jacob Connor's plan presented tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Jacob, thank you very much. A very impressive presentation. Thank you for everything you're doing. It's a great reflection on Attleboro Public Schools and you and your family. So thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to present.
All right. Moving on, we have our business agenda tonight. And for that, I will turn it over to the superintendent, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. At this time, I want to start with Mr. Rooney, who's here to talk a little bit about our plan for graduation this Thursday.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. I just have a very brief presentation. If I could share my screen. There we go. Let me just move you guys out of the way a little bit. That's not what I wanted to do. There we go. So thank you for having me tonight. As you recall, the last time I was here, I reported back to you on what the graduation working group had decided was the best option, considering the significant limitations that we have based on COVID-19. Right after we made that presentation and I informed families, the state came out with some guidance that did allow for outdoor celebrations on or after July 19th. But as we are accustomed to, sometimes the headlines don't always necessarily reflect the fine print, so to speak, that doesn't always necessarily deliver on the excitement of the headlines. And so as we really dug into what those regulations called for, we realized that all graduates and spectators had to maintain appropriate social distancing at all times. So we could have, probably tried to work through what it would be like to social distance people in the parking lots, social distance people into the facility. But we saw issues with social distancing folks for the restroom facilities. Getting 400 graduates on the turf would not have been an issue. There's plenty of real estate for that. But the spectators in the bleachers and in the standing room only areas proved to be a problem. That being said, with the guidance that came out from DESE, we decided that it was in our best interest to reconvene the graduation working group. Again, that was represented by students, parents, community members, and staff to be able to see if there were other aspects of this that we weren't noticing. But this is just a diagram of our stadium, and in terms of taking measurements and realizing not only that people had to be 6 feet apart left to right, but they also had to be 6 feet apart from front to back when sitting in the bleachers. The seating capacity on the left-hand side of the picture here, our visitors bleachers, which seat normally 400 people, would have been limited to 64 tickets. The home bleachers, which seat 1,200 people, would have been limited to 174 tickets. And then the perimeter fencing on the top side would have resulted in 55 tickets, and then on the bottom, 64 tickets. So it created a problem in that we have nearly 400 graduates, but we would only have been able to provide 357 total tickets. That was not palatable for our committee, in that a lottery to have each student not represented by at least one family member. And then the fact that some family members would have to be left out, even with just the one ticket, was something that, gave us great concern. And we talked about various aspects of that. We talked about staggering it, 2 different graduations. But our students said that if they were going to all graduate together, they wanted to all be together. And they listened to the concerns that I had expressed on behalf of the health department. The health department had always felt that our drive-up ceremony that you had approved originally was a safer option for everyone involved. And so at the end of the day, our graduation working group brought us back to the June 11th drive-up ceremony. I can outline some specifics of that, or I can take any questions about this portion if you prefer.
Mr. Rooney, while you're sharing your screen, why don't you go ahead and continue with your presentation, and then we can do questions and comments on the whole thing.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
So there are going to be there are 3 aspects to the to the drive-up ceremony. First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't express my appreciation to Jim and the staff at AACS for everything that they have done. They have made all of our virtual ceremonies, National Honor Society, Scholarship Night, Awards Night. They have made those all fantastic presentations, and they've kept our community together at a very difficult time. Last Monday, we filmed the traditional graduation speeches as well as the announcement of the prestigious Metcalf Awards. Those are going to be premiered on graduation day, which is now June the 11th at 2 p.m. And it will be on all 3 of AACS's portals, YouTube, Facebook, and locally on Channel 9. I will make sure that all of our families and our community are aware of the link to be able to watch those if they are not watching locally on Channel 9. Then starting at 5 p.m., we're going to have part 2, which is the drive-up graduation ceremony. You can see some of the details here. I've already essentially outlined that for you in the prior meeting. We've modified it slightly. I'm very grateful to about 25 of our staff members who came out on Friday afternoon, actually met at the Highland Construction parking lot, and we simulated the drive-through graduation 3 times to be able to get a sense of timing, get a sense of pacing. Some of the staff members brought their children, and it was a great opportunity for us to really determine the windows of time by which we should invite families to come and participate. This portion will start promptly at 5 o'clock. I will literally just welcome everyone and introduce Mrs. Hickox, who will read the names. And then we will start with the very first graduate. We did make the decision to go strictly in alphabetical order this year, with the exception of a few families that are carpooling together. And that decision was made so that we could have the highest possibility of having an efficient and effective and memorable experience for all. The one important thing is that construction parking lot on Rapp and Willard must be accessed by Dennis Street. The third aspect of the ceremony is that, within a week or so after the ceremony, parts 1 and 2 will be merged into one link. And that link will also include Mr. Sawyer's announcement to the graduates that those diplomas have been conferred. And once that is all one nice, neat package, I will send that out to our families and to our community that they can view at their leisure. We've also set up various communications aspects for our families. We have a distinct graduation email account. I've established a remind group as well. Unfortunately, there is some weather in the area on Thursday. So again, we want this to be memorable. We want it to be as positive as possible. So there is a possibility we may have to postpone until Friday. So it's important for, school committee members that are participating in the ceremony, or any of our family members that want updates. It would behoove them to subscribe to the Remind group. And then also tomorrow, we're working on a brief video about coaching our students through their diploma photo and so on and so forth. So just want to again thank our graduation working group, which again has various constituencies represented. There was a lot of work and there was a lot of tough discussion, but in the end, we feel like we're going to deliver a ceremony that is going to be not traditional and certainly not what anybody wanted, but it is going to be memorable and it's going to be enjoyable for all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rooney. I'll open it up for questions in a second. I just want to thank you and the administration for the work you've done on this. I know myself and other committee members have received questions from some parents who were, hoping for another result, especially after DESE came out with its guidance after July 17th. But I appreciate the hard work you put in, and I would just say, I think we all recognize that these seniors really have had a rough year, and started in the fall with Triple E, and then missed out on a lot of important milestones in their year. So I think we're all certainly sympathetic to that, and want to do the best we can. I would just say that for the people who might feel like the administration was trying to take an easy way out or get this over with, just from hearing that presentation and knowing the work that's gone in, there's nothing that's easy about the process that we're proposing for Thursday. It's a bad situation for everyone, but I really do feel that we're making the best of it. So I do want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you. I do have a few things, if I could, but Mr. Rooney, I do, having been on the subcommittee with you, I do know how much work went into it and all the discussions that we had. 2 weeks ago when we voted unanimously, based on the information we had at the time, I thought there was no chance that we would ever be able to hold a normal type graduation. 3 days later, the governor comes out and changes everything. And right away, I emailed Steve and I emailed you and the superintendent, and I said, we need to rethink this. So I appreciate that you did bring the subcommittee back together. And I also commend you on the amount of work that you put into it, with the overview and with the presentation. But as you know, it seemed like I was the only person on the subcommittee that was advocating, let's wait until August and see. It just seems that everything is changing so quickly right now that there's still, it almost seems like there is a possibility, slim, but a possibility that we could do something more. And these students have lost so much from sports and clubs and everything else that, I was advocating for the let's wait till August. I found out that one of the other local school districts, and albeit they're smaller than us, as are most of the local districts, they're doing something very similar to what we're doing. But then in I think late July or August, they're looking to actually hold a second graduation ceremony outside field style, which is per the guidelines. I kind of feel like we should try to do that. Now, maybe we get to July and August and we feel it's not possible, but who knows? Between now and then, a lot of things can change. I would just hate to see us get to August and find out that we could have done it for these students and we didn't. One thing that really upset me is the honor degree students. My understanding is there's like 41 of them this year. My son was an honors degree student last year. I know how much work and hard effort goes into that. It doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to be able to have those 41 cars line up first, as they would normally do, as an acknowledgement for their hard work. I understand it's easier to be able to just put everybody in alphabetical order from A to Z, but it's 41 students, 41 cars at the most. I just don't understand why we wouldn't just give them that acknowledgement. And the last one that I had, this is something we really didn't talk about in the subcommittee, but our students, they lost out on a prom. And now that we have this ability to hold these type of things, this outdoor open air type things, I was thinking, would there be a way, as other districts are doing, to give these students a prom, maybe in Tozier Cassidy Field? Obviously, there'd be a lot of requirements, a lot of things, social distancing and masks and all that other stuff. But would there be a way that we might be able to give these students a late summer prom? I know that was a lot of things coming at you. And again, I do appreciate the amount of time and effort and work that went into this. But that's, that's where my feelings are right now.
Yeah, so I'll go in reverse. In terms of any post-graduation celebratory activities that, that the class council wants to arrange with their class, we certainly would be open to trying to work with them. If it's something that would entail getting into the stadium, as long as there's availability and as long as it fits into the regulations, if the class council comes to us with a proposal, then we'll be more than happy to do it. There have been classes from, many years ago that have come to us and have wanted to use the library for a function, or they've wanted to use the cafeteria for a function. So I wouldn't see this as any different. As far as the honors diploma recipients, they are recognized. They are recognized in the program. They are recognized with, their various honor cords and things like that. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we're nervous about making sure that we're, pulling off the best ceremony that we possibly can. So we made a decision internally to take everyone alphabetically. And I realize that that's caused disappointment, but the folks that I've talked to about that have understood, they understandably, grudgingly, but they've understood. And, I'm hoping that in a world where, I have family members that can't get into hospitals to see, dying in-laws, and folks can't, attend funerals and things like that. I really hope that we can really just refocus our perspective on trying to celebrate this class that has been through so much, and be a little less concerned about, the order of the cars. And as far as, your first point about holding out,
Or a second ceremony.
A second ceremony. Again, that would have to be something that I would have to discuss with central office administration, and then, obviously make a proposal back to you. But, right now I'm just, I'm thinking the best thoughts I possibly can for good weather on Thursday.
Dennis?
So to echo some of Mr. Store's earlier points, I want to again say how appreciative I am for the entire committee's work on trying to find the best outcome for the ceremony, the most inclusive outcome for the ceremony, given our larger population and all of the guidelines and restrictions that can give us hope and then take it away all at once. Two quick logistical questions. Mr. Rooney, you emphasized that access to the construction lot has to be via Dennis Street. So is Rome Boulevard going to be closed or is Rathbun Willard going to become one-way traffic at Drummond Street? In other words, like, will it be blocked off so that no one can go down that way from Rathbun Willard to prevent any cross traffic?
It'll be blocked at Green. So
okay.
Residents on Burnt, Green, Fairway, they'll be able to get all the way down, at any point in time. But leaving the Bray Auditorium lot after the graduate receives their diploma, you have to take a left headed towards Rome Boulevard.
And I'm just thinking for assigned time. So like someone from a later group that's trying to get to the parking lot while the ceremony is going on, they should leave a few extra minutes to go whatever other way to get to Dennis Street. They won't be able to access from Rome.
Right. The guidance that I sent out was very comprehensive. And so, I made sure that we had access from West Street, access from County Street, access from downtown. The video that we're going to work on tomorrow, we're just going to incorporate a little bit of footage in terms of making sure that you don't access the the city has been very kind to us to put up those large message boards about, no through traffic as of 4 p.m. on the 11th. And, again, Mr. Geddes, the good thing is that, we've built in a little bit of fluidity so that, if someone does come down to, I am going to talk to Captain McDonald and see about putting a detail officer right at the intersection of Rome and West, just to, encourage people that if they're there for graduation, just to keep heading on down towards Berwick. But I think for the most part, there's enough fluidity that we'll be able to keep everybody on time.
And my last question, the decision on what's the absolute latest you would make that?
Well, I had published initially that, we would wait until noon. But I actually, could probably go as closer to 1:30. I would have to ask AACS to pull the premiere prior to 2 o'clock. There's not a ton of setup that we need to do. So, it's different from in years past when, there was one year where we literally pulled all the chairs off the stadium turf and then, threw them into the gym. There's not a lot of setup for this one. So we do have more time on our hands to be able to wait for the best outcome.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you. As I was thanking the committee, I forgot to mention AACS, Attleboro Police, everyone that is making this possible throughout the community. Their support has been outstanding and we're all grateful for it.
Absolutely.
Mr. Domenici?
Thank you. And Rob, you answered one of the logistical questions that I had, which was about, the exiting out of the parking lot and folks going down Rome. I actually had some parents asking, so thank you for bringing that up. Just a quick comment, and then I guess a question or a suggestion. We all, I think, we can all echo one another's sentiments on wishing that we had done more or could do more. For this graduating class who has had to just deal with everything since the start of their senior year through now. There are some little silver linings throughout. Having attended the Attleboro Community Academy graduation, those kids made a decision on how they wanted their graduation to be, and they owned it. It was just a nice thing to see. Such positivity. Proud parents just making the best of it, and I'm certain that whatever we choose to do, that's what these kids will do, that's what these parents will do. And then the other point is perhaps a good tradition may come of this. And Mr. Rooney, you organized a parade through town, right? And even the best of times, I think that could be something we do going forward as just a way to showcase our graduating seniors. It was an idea thought of under difficult circumstances, but kind of a cool one that hopefully under the best of circumstances, we continue and start a new tradition. My question or suggestion might be, Jim, years and years ago, I was an honor student too, so I can appreciate the effort and thought that goes in. And I wonder if maybe with some partnership with AACS, we could at least maybe even do some sort of virtual video that as part of the package could acknowledge at least the 41 honor students in some way as part of an overall package, so that maybe if they don't get their diplomas first, there is still some acknowledgement in the overall package of graduation video that they receive. And just a thought that came across as we were mentioning that. Maybe that's one way we can at least try to honor them if the other logistics are too much.
Mr. Larson, did you have a question?
Just more of a comment. First, I just wanted to thank Mr. Rooney. The parade I thought was fantastic. I had an opportunity to get onto Rathbone Willard and watch it. The kids had a great time. It was great to see the kids and the cops interacting with each other. It looked like the entire staff of the high school was out there helping keep everybody coordinated and heading in the right direction. So that was nice to see them have an opportunity to all be together one more time. Again, my thanks for all of us who go up and down Rathbone Willard on a relatively often basis. You know, your work with the city on getting the 2 signs up there, letting us know when the road's going to close and when it's going to be open. It should not be a surprise to anybody in the area. They've been lit up for about 5 days now, letting us know when it's going to happen. And so it's been a very challenging time. So my thanks to you, the committee, and everybody that's been making all this happen. And again, we'll keep our fingers crossed for Thursday night's weather.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. And again, I would like to thank the subcommittee for all their hard work in making a graduation that was most inclusive to the whole community with underneath the circumstances that have been provided. And in light of the weather that we're looking at coming up, could you please repeat once again the remind contact information for families to stay in contact regarding the graduation ceremony?
It's not an easy one.
Okay.
Let me see. I've sent it to all of them via email, but let me just scroll through my presentation. The code is F as in Frank, F as in Frank, D as in dog, B as in boy, F as in Frank, E as in elephant, K as in keep, and you text that to 81010.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else with any questions or comments on graduation? Thank you very much, Mr. Rooney, for all your hard work and the process, and for your presentation tonight. Thank you.
It's a labor of love for this group of kids and their families. So thank you so much for your support, and wish you the best in your continued good work too. Thank you.
Mr. Sawyer?
Okay, thank you, Chairman Withers. In light of recent events, it should come as a surprise to no one that questions about systemic racism and its relation to our work in the Attleboro Public Schools has been a topic of sincere concern in the last week or so. And, I was a little bit caught off guard by the question that some people asked, which was, where we stand on this issue. And that surprise comes from the fact that, we've been working so hard over the last several years to very aggressively and publicly tackle this issue as a district, which is not to say that we don't have quite a bit of work that needs to be done, because we do. But, I thought that these efforts were more widely known than clearly they are. And so, I would just want to say that while this attention to this issue is understandable as in this moment, the problem that we're discussing is not a new problem and not one that is new to us. We've been pretty deeply involved in this work for a while now. And just to remind everyone and to express these things to people who are new to this conversation, at least at how it relates to Attleboro, we have persistent achievement gaps like the rest of the Commonwealth. We have inequities in our discipline outcomes. We have good reason to believe that we have students who feel that they don't have a voice in their educational process. We clearly have hiring problems. Our staff is not representative of the community that we serve. We clearly have problems with our staff and their cultural proficiency in meeting the needs and respectfully working with all the students that we have in the district. And that's true of all of us. I'll say that That's, I'm a work in progress on that as much as anybody. And then, back to this notion that it's systemic, I would just want to point out again, not to beat a dead horse, that at the heart of all of this is a inequity in funding. Attleboro, as a community, is significantly underfunded in comparison to other communities. And it really limits our ability to meet the needs of all of our students. And as a district, we are deeply committed to meeting the needs of all students. But currently we're doing that with 200 fewer people than we would have if we were a district like an average district here in the Commonwealth. And so, the way that the whole system is set up leaves us at a disadvantage to meet the needs of our students. And so all of this contributes to being part of a system that does produce unequal outcomes. And, I guess we have to do a better job of making people aware of this problem and knowing that we recognize this, we understand it. We have created a community coalition, Be Heard, which we've been working with for 3 years to identify the causes of these problems and to work on solutions. And I should take this moment to point out that, identifying the problems is the first step, but some of these problems are so complicated and run so deeply and are so entrenched in a system that it is very, very difficult to solve these things. And so, as a school system, we really need help from people to help us to dig into these things and to fix things, to make this a more just society, to make our school system better and more effective at meeting its mission to meet the needs of all of our students. I want to be clear. We make no excuses for the fact that we have these inequities. We have a real sense of urgency that we need to fix these things. And we are asking people to help, not just to point out the fact that we have a problem, which, certainly when people see a problem, they should speak up, and we welcome that. But, we also need people to help us to dig in and to do the difficult and, unglorified work of fixing an institution. And so we hope that the current conditions that we're facing as a nation will help to create new opportunities for us as a community to come together and to do this work together. And perhaps new people will see this as a chance to get involved and to help us because we are deeply committed to this work. So I just really felt like that needed to be addressed.
Mr. Gaddis?
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer, for those thoughts. Just to support a lot of what you're saying, as we've been in the process over the last year, or we were in the process until everything shut down, of developing our mission and vision for the next 5 years. This was really the core of one of the main goals of that group, was to address inequities throughout the system based on data from students and their families, anywhere from, depending on ethnicity, no more than a third of students and their families felt like they were represented by our staff properly, or that our staff were prepared to address cultural issues, or that they had proper access to different services. And so it is something that we have been aware of as a district for a while. But like you said, we need help in addressing it. Someone that's been key through Be Heard and through that working group on the mission statement and vision statement for the next 5 years was Reverend Harris. I know she participated in Councillor Kobus's pandemic update this past Sunday night for a great discussion as kind of a deviation from the pandemic, but we need more Reverend Harrises. Reverend Harris is one woman that does incredible work, but we need more of her in this community. And I hope that more families, more students can find ways to get more involved, or can reach out to us so that we can help them get more involved to help start solving those problems.
Thank you.
Dennis. Okay, to move on. The state issued guidance within the last few days. I know that it created a stir in some circles. Just want to clear a few things up. The guidance that was released was not their guidance for the fall. That is still forthcoming. We expect that in 2 weeks or so. And when that comes out, we have a lot of work to unpack it because we are told to expect a very detailed set of regulations that we're going to have to follow. What they did release was two things. One was guidance for summer programs. So a lot of the things that we've received questions about today and over the weekend were related to the guidance on our summer programs, which are extremely restrictive. And I know people were very concerned that if that represents what we're going to be facing in the fall, then we're going to have some real challenges. Now, I want to be very clear. We are expecting real challenges in the fall under any circumstance. The notion that the fall is going to look anything like life did before March 13th, I mean, we should give up on that notion. But we are hopeful that the guidance for the fall will look different than that summer guidance, which is, really about a transition from the current conditions to what they're hoping will be the case come fall. The other thing that the state did release was some pretty specific purchasing requirements. They want us to buy 3 months worth of supplies, and they were very specific about what supplies we need to include in our buildings. While we will be asking staff and students to come to school in the fall wearing a mask, we do need to have backup masks for people who forget one or lose one or have it damaged or can't provide a mask. So we have to have enough masks so that on any given day there's enough for whoever needs one. So that's a pretty significant purchase in and of itself. The other big thing that came out in that guidance is that we have quite a bit of equipment to buy for our nurses. And it really highlights how, our nurses in the district will be on the front line of this issue when we go back to work in the fall. They are going to be facing a situation where, people with symptoms, conceivably will be reporting to their office and, basically we'll be treating that like a hospital environment. And so there's quite a bit of work that we're going to have to do this summer to prepare the district to keep our nurses safe and our students safe in light of those circumstances. So we did get the guidance on the purchase that we need to make. Mr. Furtado is already busy compiling that. We'll be doing that at this time because for that equipment to come in time for the fall, the state has advised us to purchase it now. So we are moving ahead with that. And then again, the summer guidelines, certainly are restrictive, but I'll remind everyone that at this point, we're most of our programming this summer is being done remotely. We spoke to families, and most families were not comfortable with sending kids to school quite yet for the summer programs that we have, and so we were already planning to do that remotely. So those guidelines, largely don't apply to us at this time. Any questions about state guidance?
Mr. Hill?
This is just a general thought I had and just would love your take on it. Not to put you on the spot, but you're good on the spot. In terms of, as you start to get the state guidance and what school could possibly look, in-person school could possibly look like, and I've kind of played this through in my head and said, okay, what would teachers do? How many students would there be? Students won't be working in groups, teams, and so I'm just going to put this out there. Like, what is the actual tangible benefit of going to school in these conditions, as opposed to doing something online? Besides the economic benefits of having some place where your kids go, like, is there really, can you make a pedagogical argument that in-person school is superior to online school, given various things that could happen? And we can table the question too once we know the actual guidance, but it's just something that's been going through my mind.
So I'll be happy to give you my off-the-cuff reaction to that question. I think it's a fantastic question. Yeah, would have loved to have been given a heads up to that I was going to get asked it. But
I literally just had this
no,
conversation with my wife like an hour ago. So
it's a fantastic question, and for this reason, I think there are a lot of us who felt already, and what we dealt with remote learning really drove home the fact that you know a digital learning environment is no replacement for what we can do in a classroom setting. That learning is social, and that we learn best when we learn together. That by having the opportunity to interact personally with our students, we do a far better job of engaging them and getting the best out of them. So while, of course, it is our dream to go back to a situation where we can run school the way we are all trained and prepared and set up to do our work, we know that that's not going to be the case out of the gate. We think we can do a better job with the remote learning component if we have more regular interactions with students to bolster what they have to do on their own. Because I think what we saw both as parents of kids who were doing this, but also as educators who were on the receiving end of what was coming back, too much was put onto families to support the educational needs of students. And it really, really outstripped their ability to do what we were asking them to do. As much as we were trying our best to scale that back, we tried really hard, but I don't think we nailed that balance. And I think that really what it comes down to is that we're just none of us are set up for that success. So absolutely, I think there's a pedagogical advantage, aside from the other ones, to us being able to see the kids with some regularity in person.
thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you. A couple of things. First, I totally agree with you. I saw it with my son who had to finish his first college year remote learning. It is not even close to as beneficial as in-person learning. And that's at college level. I can't even imagine elementary level. And, of course, then you have the secondary component that, yes, right now, parents are home and they're able to, with a lot of difficulty, help their students and get their students doing what they have to do. Sooner or later, a lot of those parents have to go back to work. So this can't be sustained. This has to change. I read the article recently. I forget which paper it was in, which I believe is kind of what you were referring to, the governor's guidance. And the article made it sound like that is the requirements of September. And they were talking about 10 students to a classroom, 12 people maximum, including staff members. And I'm thinking, that's impossible. There's no way that we can do when we have, at times high 20s, if not, unfortunately, at times even more. And all of a sudden, somehow or another, switch that to 10 students max. And that doesn't even take into account those with special needs who need the additional, the one-on-ones and all that other stuff. So I just wanted to verify, are you indicating that what was in that article was not actually accurate, that is not the guidance for September?
Well, I'm not sure which article you're referring to, but the guidance that came out was for the summer. That was summer guidance for programs that are happening between now and the fall. The guidance for the fall has not been released. That is not available. And, we know that they're going to ask us to do what we can to reduce the number of the people in the building on any given day, right? That's something that they've pretty clearly indicated to us is coming. Well, how they communicate that and how they set up the rules really make a difference. If they tell us that there's some number of students per room, like they are this summer, 10 to 2 or whatever, I believe the guidance was for
That's what I saw.
that, right? That's a very different reality than you have to cut your classes in half, right? It's also different than if they tell us that everyone must be distanced at such and such a footage, right? So, at Attleboro High School, for those who have had the joy of being there, we'll cram 28 students into half of what a room used to be, right? And so, basically everyone's on top of each other. So if it's about cutting it in half, well, fine, then we'll put 14 in that room. If it's about 10 to 1, well, then we're going to have to split the class into 3 different sections. If it's about keeping kids at 6 feet, I don't know, we might have to cut it into 4 sections. So we really have to see what the state is asking of us And we're waiting, but no, that is not available.
Okay, appreciate getting that out there. And before I ask my second question, I do want to say in that article, it talked about all the things you were just talking about, that we have to supply masks and that we have to supply sanitizer and that we have to supply face shields and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking we already have budget concerns. So this just adds to that. So I know we're not there yet. I know Mark is doing his job to figure out what that's going to be, and I'm sure that'll come to us later. But I have concerns on that. But my next question has to do with there's a rumors out there that people have come to me that there's discussions about maybe doing some sort of, half the class is in the building on Mondays and Wednesdays, and the other half of the class is in the building on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and then next week it switches. Please tell me we're not actually looking at that right now, that that's not a real rumor.
You all froze for a significant amount of time, so I think that means that I was the problem.
Did you hear all what I?
No, I didn't hear any of it.
Okay, I'll try it again. So there's a rumor out there that people have come to me about that is indicating that we're looking at possibly doing a 50-50 split kind of thing with half the students in the class half the time and the other half working from home. And then on other days, the half that are home or in school and vice versa, which per my comment earlier, couldn't work because again, parents have to go back to work. So is that real?
So let's be very clear. The Attleboro Public Schools are not looking to do that. The Attleboro Public Schools are looking to follow the guidance from the state, right?
Do we have reason to believe that might be the guidance?
Absolute reason to believe that that is exactly what we're going to be asked to do.
Okay. Wow. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I assume that because I know some schools have looked at, and I assume this is one of the things you look at. Some schools have looked at is kind of just an alternate way to do it of alternating weeks, things like that.
So we'll be looking at what kind of leeway we're given. It's probably easier on families to go week on, week off, I think is where you were going with that.
Yeah.
And if we have that opportunity, we'll look at that. I have to tell you educationally, back to Mr. Hill's point, I think every other day is better educationally. The fewer days between seeing the teacher, the easier it is to maintain momentum and to, create a learning environment that you can sustain and get results from. So depending on what the state tells us we can do, to the degree that we have any choice at all, we will have a conversation as a community about what that's going to be, because to the point that I think is being made here tonight, the impact on families is significant, and we have to weigh those concerns along with the educational ones.
The expectation is that the direction on this is going to come straight from the state, correct?
Yeah, but I don't know whether they're going to tell us every other day or every other week, or tell us you have to split it into half and you get to decide the frequency of the switch, right?
Right. Yeah, my question was more the idea of whether or not, we're not able to send all the students to school every day. That's going to be based on guidance that comes from the state.
If we're doing that, it's because the state's telling us to. But I am telling you that every indication is that is exactly what we're going to be told to do. Anyone that's holding out hope that that's not going to happen, I caution you. That's not the message we're getting.
Okay.
All right. Wait, some more good news?
It feels like a budget meeting.
Okay. No, in all seriousness, just wanted to remind everybody, this Wednesday, we are doing our Chromebook collection district-wide. And then the following week, starting Monday, we have opportunities for students to retrieve belongings in our schools. In both cases, families should pay close attention to the message they're receiving from their schools. The principals should be giving detailed explanations about windows of time and appropriate days and all those kinds of things. And I just would ask the parents pay extra close attention to that message. I would also point out that we have worked hard over the last month to create safety protocols that maintain appropriate social distancing and other practices that we know will keep both our employees and our families safe. And that, I would also point out that, we just entered phase 2 of the state's reopening plan today. When we decided that we would set that last week of June as the week to do this stuff, We were hopeful that the state would be relaxing things by the time we got to there. And so we're very happy that this timing is coinciding with that anticipation. Phase 2 doesn't really consider schools at all, right? So the rules for schools haven't changed at all. We're all still closed at this time. But just the fact that under phase 2, so many more things are now opening up. It would have felt strange if we had maintained the opinion that because we were stay at home, that we couldn't allow kids into the buildings to get to retrieve their belongings. As we are now approaching phase 2, it just feels like it's more in line with how things are going statewide. So we feel like that timing really worked out well for us, even if the phase 2 guidance doesn't really say anything about schools specifically. Any questions about those events? All right, well then my final piece of news for you this evening, I just want to let you all know that the Willett staff were informed this afternoon that they have concluded their process and identified an assistant principal for next year. Her name is Miss Christine Brierly. She comes to us from Providence, where she has been a career educator, both a classroom teacher and instructional coach there for, I believe, 24 years. So she comes with a lot of experience. Certainly her work in Providence, I think, gives her a set of experiences that will be helpful to us. And in meeting with her, I think she has a lot to offer the Attleboro Public Schools, and we look forward to bringing her forward to introduce you to her in the near future.
Thank you.
All right, so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Regan to talk a little bit about wrapping up remote learning.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So within the past couple of days, you should have received the last remote learning plan. In that plan, there was a link that had the summer enrichment guide embedded within it. So it contains a lot of digital and non-digital activities that are optional for your child to work with over the summer. And then it also contains the summer reading lists. So please pay special attention to those. We collaborated with the Attleboro Library and wanted to make sure that a lot of the titles that were offered were also available for our families at the library. When you come in this week to either drop off your Chromebook or next week to drop off some of the materials that you have and pick up your belongings, we will also have hard copies of the summer enrichment packet available for you at that time. So if you missed it on the link, it's also on the website, and we will have hard copies for you available. One last thing I did want to also mention is in Superintendent Sawyer's letter that he mailed out to families this past week, included in it was a survey to families asking about how we did with our response to the pandemic and our ability to communicate with you, and some of the changes that were made along the way, as far as how we were able to scale back some of the assignments that were included in our remote learning plans, and moving all of our assignments over to one platform using Google Classroom. So we're very interested in hearing your feedback and our response to the information that you provided us. The survey is also on our Facebook page, and the link can also be found in Superintendent Sawyer that he mailed out this week. Those are all of the updates that I have right now, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Okay, to talk a little bit about special education, I'll turn it over to our director, Ms. Medeiros.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Sawyer. So good evening, everyone. I just want to start off by thanking the staff, families, and students who've plugged away through this remote learning environment, and for those participating in our extended school year program, and we'll continue to do that over the summer for the most part for our in-district students and for many of our out-of-district students as well. We do have I want to acknowledge we had the virtual Special Olympics last week. I know that, it's a great day here in Attleboro that's one of my favorite days of the year. It was still, even though it was done virtually, it was great to see families and staff and students participating in that through pictures on social media and different platforms. So there's that. The ACE PAC has scheduled just like everything else, a remote Zoom meeting for their June meeting. That'll be on the 17th at 5 o'clock. I know that they're advertising that. Lori and I will be participating in that. It'll be more of a question and answer with families, an opportunity for them to ask us questions and to kind of discuss, anything that they want to discuss at that moment. As far as remote learning, so families are going to also receive, if your student is in a program or in a receive pullout services, you also are going to receive, you've also received for these 2 weeks a remote learning plan. We are going to, in special education, we're continuing to offer services, direct services. Staff is working with families on an individual case by case, what those look like, particularly as we collect the Chromebooks, but they are offering direct services. So I wanted to make families and assure them of that they will continue to do that over the next 2 weeks as we kind of finish up the year. As far as extended school year, so the guidance that came out that is all over the media, that guidance was that came out late last night from the department. It was very particular to special ed services for the summer only. We have a meeting, it's 15 pages guidance that came out last night. It includes things just as grouping those requirements that are in there with the 10 students, the 12 can't be in more than 12 people in a room. That is specific to special education services. So I want to clarify that because that has not been, I know that, you all had questions about that and Mr. Sawyer tried to respond, but that was very specific to special ed services. The guidance included things in there that was specific around protocols for protective equipment for staff, toileting, de-escalation, screening and monitoring, transportation, training for staff and students. If a district does decide to provide on-site extended school year services. I know that some of our out-of-district programming is looking at that. They've held off. So those families are going to they're going to work on a case by case with families around that. However, for us in district, we're going to continue with, we will be doing remote learning. And for many of our out of district students, they will start off with remote learning and probably end with remote learning for the summer. So I just wanted to assure families of that. If your child is participating in remote learning, because I've had a few questions about that over the last few days, and you have a Attleboro Chromebook, your child is going to keep that Chromebook for the summer so that you can access our services over the summer. So you don't need to turn it in. Principals are going to have a list of who's participating in an extended school year so that they can verify whether the Chromebook needs to be returned or not. So I wanted to assure families of that as well. And I don't know if you have any questions for me. All right, thank you.
Scott, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's since we have you, Yvonne,
Sorry.
Mark, maybe you'll cover this at some point. I just wanted to get a clarifying point. Have we at all needed to use our stabilization funding for special education this year?
That would be a question for Mr. Furtado.
Okay. I'll cede that until we talk to Mark.
I'll just say from my standpoint, we haven't exceeded the special ed out of district budget this year, what we projected.
Okay, great. Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. This time I'll turn it over to Ms. Singer to talk to us a little bit about human resources.
Good evening. Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. As Mr. Sawyer mentioned earlier, we're phasing in our reopening for staff. While the state guidance does not pertain to schools and schools still remain closed, we have year-long employees who we are transitioning back to work. Certainly our custodial and maintenance staff have been here the whole time. They didn't really, they haven't left. But the goals of our phasing in of reopening is to, maintain a safe approach to staff coming back to school, to minimize or back to work, to minimize the person-to-person contact, and then just to ease staff back into what I hate calling a new normal at this point with the guidelines that were set out by the state. So the staff that are currently in the building are obviously required to wear masks when they're there. We have signage for distancing. We are staggering work schedules in offices so that there are a limited number of employees at the same time in a particular office. We are requiring staff to sign in and out and maintaining a log for the purposes, if needed, to give to the Department of Health. And we're certainly asking staff to be very vigilant. If you have a cough, a fever, or shortness of breath, stay home. If you're not feeling well, stay home. If you are in a high-risk group, we are still recommending that you work remotely. And so, again, these will, these restrictions will change as the phased-in approach from the state moves forward, although as the state, I'm sure you're all aware, moved into phase 2 today, that really did not change any of the guidance that we have. With one exception we're still trying to clarify is the amount of people who can be in one space, if that's still 10 or if that's being expanded a little bit. So we're in the process of receiving getting some guidance around that from the city. There's also still travel restrictions in place for staff. So if you travel outside of the state, with the exception of Rhode Island, because we have a lot of staff who live there. But if you travel voluntarily out of state for whatever reason, you are you're required to quarantine for 14 days. That is still in the state guidance. So we those are also included in our guidelines. And again, as the state moves forward in their phases, we will reassess our guidelines and communicate those to our staff. This just in, it is 10. It will, thank you, Mark. It will remain 10 for the number of people that can be in one space at one time. So does anybody have any questions on the reopening guidelines that we've established for staff? As Superintendent Sawyer mentioned, Willett announced today their hire of Christine Brierly. I just want to say that Willett, along with Hyman Fine, did a phenomenal job in the administration in those buildings of creating a diverse search committee who weeded through many applications, had very thoughtful analysis of what they were looking for in their new assistant principal, and crafted very good questions to get down to candidates to move forward. So I'm very excited with both of their choices, as Superintendent Sawyer mentioned, Mr. Collins for Hyman Fine a few weeks ago, and then Ms. Brierly tonight. So, and then my last question. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm that was our final elementary assistant principal vacancy, correct?
Correct.
So
both Hyman Fine and Willett were the last two, so that all of our elementary schools now have assistant principals.
Which is phenomenal progress from where we were a few years ago in some badly needed positions. So it's exciting to have those all filled, and the ones that we've had for a year or two have been great so far. So very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last item on my report tonight, we have two ratified MOAs by two of our collective bargaining units, the administrators and the maintenance. So I put that forward. I'll hand that over to Chairman Withers.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Singer. So we discussed the proposed memorandum of agreements that have been ratified by the unions in executive session. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement with the administrators union.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or comments? Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yeah.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
Yes.
All right, thank you. At this time, I entertain a motion to approve the maintenance, the contracts with the maintenance union that was discussed and brought forward at executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? All right, seeing none. Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Both passed. Thank you, Ms. Singer.
Thank you very much. That concludes my report for this evening.
Okay, so the administration will finish up with Mr. Furtado, who seems like he found a light switch, and we'll perhaps get some information on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Good evening. A couple of follow-up items regarding the COVID guidelines the state released Friday late. That's about a $90,000 expense for us to reopen in September, and that does not include disinfecting our buildings. So that's simply to provide supplies to staff per the guidelines released by DESE. The SPED stabilization fund has not been used, and we do not anticipate using it this year. Third, I would say if any of you go to visit any of our schools, you're going to see a very different place. We've been very busy establishing signage, cleaning stations, plexiglass dividers in all of our buildings. They will change the way we do things going forward. Regarding FY20, we still have a significant amount of work to do, and I'm a little nervous being this far into June and being in the circumstance we're in. It's been a real challenge just because of the absence of the people who do this work at the end of the year. But we don't have any budget concern for FY20. We'll be returning funds to the city, and I wish I could tell you how much, but I just don't have a really good number. It may approach $1 million between transportation and the operating budget by the end of the year. And then regarding FY21, we're still operating under the auspices of the budget presented to the committee after the governor announced his budget in January. So, $81.8 million, and nothing that we've heard has taken us off that track. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
One question I have, Mr. Furtado, on fiscal year 21, and I believe our next meeting is the public hearing and the voting on the budget.
Yes.
A lot of questions I get are with respect to what's happening in other districts with, you're seeing news of significant layoffs and cuts of programming, and all with essentially the same message that, money next year isn't going to be there. And so, I understand that we're working on the assumption given to us from the city that, they'll fund us as they promised and that the state will come through. But, what do you say to those people who say, well, how can you proceed that way? But while everyone else is, expecting the worst?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I believe our conditions on the municipal side are different. And that has to do with sort of historic projection methods employed for city revenues, where there was some room to make a depreciated revenue picture work. So I think that's somewhat unique to Attleboro and takes away, for us, at least half of the threat that exists. Now, and the state issue is a two-pronged issue for us. One is, Chapter 70 funding I think the city's perspective on that is the number we were given is the lowest number every year, right? It goes through House and Senate and joint committees and always gets increased. So there's some thought that, there's not going to be a great decrease in Chapter 70 funding. If that's the case, we're in very good shape. And then the second prong to that is city funding, municipal aid. And from the city's perspective, they're they feel ready for that. We'll who knows, and we'll see. I think we're a little bit insulated from some of the forces that other communities are experiencing or anticipate experiencing.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Furtado? Don't see any. Thank you, Mark.
That concludes my report, Mr. Withers.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. Next on our agenda, we have, as I call it up, sorry about that. Next on our agenda, we have the approval of the full and subcommittee meeting for the school year of 2020-2021. The proposed schedules were circulated with your materials. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Mr. Geddes?
Just looking at the full committee schedule for 2020-2021, it did not include the meeting that I believe have scheduled for July 20th, 2020. Is that meeting still on, or are we not meeting till August?
We will meet once in July. So
That's what I thought. It just
yeah,
wasn't
so it should
listed.
be on there.
Yeah, I think the first one on that list was August 11th, maybe.
Right, I believe our schedule had been approved through the July 20th meeting had already been scheduled. So I think
Okay.
this is August going forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, motion has been seconded. Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson,
She's muted.
yeah. Give me a thumbs up.
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next, we have our minutes from our May 18th, 2020 meeting. The minutes were circulated with your packet. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or changes? All right, seeing none. Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda, 2 items tonight. I'll read them both and then entertain a motion and take the roll call. First is a motion to accept the donation in the amount of $450.59 from individual student lunch balances as broken down in the June 4th memorandum from myself. And item number 2 is a motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,000 from the Attleboro Lacrosse Association to the gifts donation lines at the high school.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
Yes.
All right, that concludes our consent agenda tonight. Next, we have our subcommittee meetings. And that will start with infrastructure and facilities, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Domenici for his report.
Thank you, Chairman. So we hadn't met in a little bit of time, and we touched on a few different items here. So the first and foremost was MSBA. The high school project still remains, on time. Structural steel and roof elements are actually a little bit ahead of schedule currently. And also the field work, they're on track for completion in October. So, should there be fall sports, they won't have any impacts by the construction, which is good news. We are also, some of us, I believe, well, let me take a step back. So the project thus far, we haven't had any any major impacts based upon COVID-19 closures. But we may receive, I think they're anticipating some minimal funding as a result of the pandemic. So again, project on time, on budget, and I believe our honorable body, as well as the school building committee, have been invited to be on site on Wednesday for an on-site visit of the site, which is great. Everybody should have received that email, and those who are, of course, going to go, there's I would just advise to adhere to the guidelines that were provided in terms of what to wear on a construction site, as well as expect to be checked in the way a construction worker would, temperatures taken. If you're not feeling well, unfortunately, I would recommend not coming. From the MSBA, we moved on to, we have a lot of stuff going on right now. So the Brennan and Wamsutta roof projects, they had recently had met, we met at the end of May for our meeting. So they had recently met regarding the roofs. 6 to 8 contractors have voiced interest in providing the services for these projects, which is great news considering we were a bit late in moving this along. A lot of credit goes to our construction manager and our project manager for kind of moving things along quickly. And it's great news to have that many contractors with interest. That should be fortuitous for us in terms of pricing, hopefully. And as also mentioned, once that decision is made, the roofs will be scheduled to start in June. They are expected to be on time and on budget for the start of the upcoming school year. And from there, we move over to the elementary schools, Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts, for the gym floors. These projects, the city has informed us that the projects are being bonded. They should be completed this summer as well. The total cost estimates are about $250,000 per school. So, and again, just to remind folks, the current floors will be removed and replaced with wooden floors, which was the preference of the city. From those projects, we did have a couple of other smaller projects that were on our books to discuss. The replacement of the Thatcher Elementary School chiller. I think it's it's about a $30,000 investment, but as Mr. Furtado pointed out, it's a worthwhile investment. The system is pretty old. There's no guarantee it would start up in October. And additionally, LED lighting and environmental system work has also been completed at Thatcher. The parking lot pavements at Hyman Fines, Hill Roberts, and Thatcher are being planned. But right now, that's still with the city. No details have been released. There was some initial discussions with Public Works. So, and then again, also included was since March, and with the closure of buildings, some additional plumbing, electric work, HVAC maintenance have been done. In preparation for COVID-19 standards that we'll have to adhere to. Carpenters are, install plexiglass. It's an ongoing project. Even, when we was at the high school recently, you can start to see some of that in effect. Some additional preparations are ongoing based upon input coming from the governor and DESE to just try to get the schools ready. I think some other items include, some updated disinfecting process standards. The custodial staff has been, I think they've had at least 3 training sessions to date on their preparations. So while all this good infrastructure work is going on, our custodial staff and Sodexo are making sure that we are prepared to to get ready, both for the opening of the schools that have taken place, and as well as, further down the line for the starter class. Our superintendent Sawyer had talked about the Chromebooks. And then I think we had a couple of other items with respect to high school preservation. I know Mr. Geddes has been working with Mr. Parento on the Dench letters to bring back to the family. And I think that's actually, we got an update this week. So I think that's, Sigley has done the work necessary to return those to the Dench family. And then lastly, but certainly not least, I was reached out to by our veteran service agent, Ken Bodiger. He had mentioned to me the possibility of a POW chair of honor that he could procure, and thought that perhaps, based upon, such good camaraderie and goodwill and connection and community brought forth by the moving wall between veterans and the Attleboro Public Schools, that perhaps the new high school might be a good place to have this chair of honor. I think it would require about maybe 10 to 12 square feet. It's a chair along with the an American flag and a POW MIA flag. And if not the new high school, then potentially, on the grounds or some other place. Mr. Bodiger is willing to come and speak to the whole committee if we need to. But just a suggestion that he made, which I thought was a good one. I just was trying to get some guidance on how to kind of bring this through our subcommittee and to the committee, but thought it was worth mentioning in our discussion points. Just another way of, one city area, connecting with our schools. And I thought it was a great idea. So based upon whatever our thoughts are, we can reach out to Mr. Bodiger to talk about it. We certainly have time. The new high school is not going to be ready for a couple of years. He did mention that if we wanted to consider putting it somewhere else, one of the existing buildings, that could also be arranged. And
my suggestion would be to have him make his presentation to your subcommittee, excuse me, and then have discussion with the administrative representative at your Mr. Furtado at your hearing. If you voted out a subcommittee, we can bring it to the full committee and vote on it here as well. But I think if it's something that you and your subcommittee want to proceed, it makes sense to me, and I would invite him to come and make his presentation to your body, and just invite let the full committee know when that agenda is shared, so that if anyone wants to come, they can.
Sure. We have, I think our next subcommittee meeting is not until September, so we have a little bit of time to plan it out.
Yeah.
I will advise our committee if we get Mr. Bodiger on the books for September.
Great. Mr. Storrs?
Thank you. Mr. Domenici, just two questions. The first one is, I just wanted to verify for the school committee members who are going to be taking a look at the high school on Wednesday. Is that 4 p.m.?
Yes, it's at 4 p.m. Meeting in front of Consigli.
Okay, show up a little earlier or right at 4?
I would recommend getting there a few minutes before.
Okay.
They are gonna let us park, I think, on site, but right up next to where the offices are, and we'll meet outside and get preparations from there. If anybody needs the email with respect to the type of clothing to wear and things of that nature, I'm happy to forward that again. But I think everybody should have received it by now.
I'm going to re-forward it now so everyone has it. I have it in my inbox here.
And as Scott, the second thing is, as a veteran, I truly support doing anything for POWs. I think it's an amazing thing. I would actually suggest putting that in a place where it could actually be used. For example, Tozier Cassidy Field. So
that was
okay.
One of the suggestions, Jim, and I think it's a good one.
Yeah, because I would love to, if there's a POD in attendance, for them to be able to sit in a place of that recognition, I think that would make a lot of sense to me. Than just having it at, an arbitrary other place within our school district, or maybe auditorium would be another one. But I think the Tozier Cassidy would make a lot of sense. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. I know we had, we have veterans, on our committee who, who might have some good suggestions like those, Jim. We actually talked about potentially having it at the field. That might be a good community spot to have it. So I will circle back with you, of course, when we get ready to have Mr. Bodicher come and speak to us.
Well, thank you.
Rob?
Just to be clear, I believe the purpose of the chair is to not be sat in.
Oh,
I think it's
misunderstood.
I think it's more of a symbolic memorial for those that are no longer with us or didn't return from battle. But I'd have to double check that. That's why, because we did think Tozier Cassidy would be a good spot for it as well.
And it still might be, but with those guidelines you just indicated, in my opinion.
Anything else, Mr. Domenici?
No, that we didn't have any motions to bring out, so that concludes the update for the committee.
Thank you. Next, we have Finance and Budget. Mr. Larson?
Thank you. The Budget and Finance Subcommittee met Wednesday, June 3rd. Mr. Vitato took us through the monthly budget reports, and we reviewed and started to project where we thought FY20 would end. As Mr. Furtado made the comment earlier in his report, there will be a positive balance at the end of the year, which is always a great thing. And then he also spoke of the transportation budget. That money is still, I mean, it's projected to be a savings. Based on the agreement that was negotiated between the district and Bloom that we approved at our last meeting, but still has to be ratified, I believe, by the city. So up until the time they ratify that, those savings don't exist. If they ratify it, those savings should exist. So just a little clarity there. The $1 million number that Mr. Furtado was talking about was actually two-part. Part of it is transportation. It's roughly half and half, based on that agreement if it's ratified. So that being said, the FY20 looks positive to end. We had a brief MSBA update, but Mr. Domenici just took us through that. We are still working, as Mr. Furtado said, to the $81.8 million budget for FY21. And that is assuming that when the state passes its budget in July, there aren't any surprises. We have to have our budget done before theirs is. So there is a little bit of a waiting process that we're going to have to sit through in the month of July until we know for sure what's going to happen. Then we talked about some contracts that we have coming up, and that being the situation, we've got 4 motions that were recommended by the subcommittee to bring forward to the full committee. So the first one is motion to send to the full committee to approve the 3rd year of a 3-year contract with North Turf Maintenance and Grounds and Athletic Fields, along with alternative bid number 1. So I'd entertain that motion.
So
Moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I don't see any, Mr. Chairman. Do you see any?
No, I do not. Would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Thank you. The second motion that we're recommending to the full committee is motion to approve to enter a 5-year lease for the minivan fleet.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I don't see any.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
All right, going along with that last motion, recommending to the full committee a motion to declare our fleet of minivans as surplus and to use them for trade-in value for the new lease agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
All right, Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mr. Dominici,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Thank you. And our last motion that we move to the full committee, entertain a motion to approve the Whitson's Food Service Management Contract Extension Agreement number 03-016 as approved by Mass ESE Office of Food and Nutrition Program.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
All right, Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mr. Dominici,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
And again, all I would like to do is just thank Mr. Furtado and his staff because they're certainly trying to close out a year where there's usually all hands on deck. And right now there's only one person on deck at a time in that office. So they're trying to do some pretty intense work in a very difficult way. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Larson. Finally, we have our policy and personnel report. Mr. Storrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee met on June 1st remotely. All of the following motions, I'm going to summarize all of them. They've all been voted out of the policy subcommittee unanimously and will be brought up for a motion for approval by the full committee. I'm going to go through each of the different policies and then look to approve everything all at once for roll call purposes. But before I do so, if anybody, I will ask, and if anybody wants me to separate one or more of the policies, I will do so. First, we have a motion is to approve policy JF, the residency policy. This is a great example I brought to the committee some months ago, that if there's any policy ever that you wish this policy subcommittee to take a look at, let me know, and I'll work with the administration to put it on an agenda and discuss it. Ms. Sawyer did exactly that with the residency policy, and over the last couple of meetings, we've had some discussions. I reported in at the last meeting regarding one of those, and we continued with that discussion at our last at the June 1st meeting. We actually did find that there were some things that the policies requires that we were a little, we needed to make sure what's happening, that weren't happening to the same level that we felt that we thought it was happening. And that had to do with the frequency in which the residency is re-verified. Whenever we have a new student come to the district, including with kindergarten or pre-K, there is, per the policy requirements, that a parent or guardian has to go through to prove that they are an Attleboro resident. I think everybody would agree and understand that this is the Attleboro Public Schools, and it's our responsibility to ensure that it's the Attleboro residents who are attending school in Attleboro, with other than legal exceptions to that statement. So the policy, as we reviewed it, indicated that from kindergarten to first, and then again from first to second, as well as when they go from elementary school to middle school and then middle school to high school, is the time frame in which the residency is supposed to be re-verified. The administration and the committee agreed that the second one between kindergarten and first grade was a little redundant. They're in the same building, they're in the same school. If they've already been verified when they came in as kindergarten, there did not seem to be a need to re-verify them when they go from kindergarten to first grade. Just to verify with Ms. Regan or Ms. Singer, was that a good summary?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So that's the only change that we're looking to do with the policy, is remove the requirement of re-verification of residency between kindergarten and first grade. And the administration is working with the building administrators to ensure that the residency re-verification is happening at the other time. So of course, whenever a new student's coming in to the district, it's happening, and it was already happening, but now we're going to re-verify at the timeframes of when they go from elementary to middle school, as well as middle school to the high school. So that's the residency policy. Is there any questions on the residency policy? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on. Next, we have a motion to note the review date of policy EEA, the school committee transportation. This policy aligns with the mass policy, so we're not looking to make any changes, just note the review date. Any discussion regarding policy EEA? Okay, seeing none. Next, we have a motion to adopt a brand new policy. This is masks policy IHBHE, remote learning. As you can imagine, with the end of the school year, remote learning has become a very important thing and kind of a new thing. We haven't ever had to deal with something of this nature as far as I can remember. So MASC has come up with a new policy. They also had an exhibit, but the exhibit, the administration committee agreed that it really just focused on issues to consider when developing the remote plan that is required by the policy IHBHE. We didn't feel that was necessary, the exhibit, so we're only bringing forward the policy itself. So to just, I'll ask the administration if they could just do a summary of IHBHE, please. Either Lori or Julianne, either.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Perfect.
In thinking about remote learning and all the work that has quickly gone into preparing for our closure, things that were included in this policy were identifying goals and strategies for maintaining standards of student achievement, utilizing the most effective tools and resources to deliver the instruction, providing resources equitably, like including Chromebooks and other materials that would be available, and then making sure that we're collaborating with other agencies within the city, and making sure that we're, consulting with bargaining units that we collaborate with, so that we're all on the same page and providing the best instruction for our students during the remote time.
That's great. Part of the policy, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is a remote learning plan that the administration has been working on. So that is part of the policy. That's something that we may look at in the future, but it's going to define all of the safety and support and all the other details that are associated with the policy itself. Okay, so that's the new policy from MASC. Is there any questions regarding policy IHBHE remote learning? Okay, seeing none. The next, we have a motion to approve minor edits and then also a redesignation, which I'll explain in a moment, of policy IHAMA, which is teaching about tobacco, alcohol, and drugs, and then redesignation of IHAMB, parent notification relative to sex education. So I'll talk about the redesignation first. It's simple that this is something we've noted in the past that we kind of have the policies reversed as per the NSP, the NAPN, the MASC policies, the coding system. So we're just looking, since we're approving minor changes to one of the policies, we felt that this was the appropriate time to try to get those realigned. So it's nothing more than the parent notification relative to sex education should be IHAMA, and the teaching about tobacco, alcohol, and drugs policy should be IHAMB. So that's part of what we're looking to do. But in addition, when it came to the IHAMA, which which will be IHAMB, teaching about tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. There were some various minor differences between our policy and the mass policy. So we're looking to align mostly throughout the policy with the notable exceptions. Our policy that we want to maintain the language went a little bit further regarding tobacco. It actually broke out tobacco products, e-cigarettes, and vaporizers, and we felt that was valuable to keep those, the breakout of the different types of tobacco products. And also we had wording or information regarding to relate to the use of drugs and alcohol to physical, mental, social, and emotional practices. Mass doesn't have that wording, but we in the administration discussed and we felt that that was important to maintain. I believe that was, and other than that, it was, very minor things. For example, we had parents. It was time for the policy to include parents/guardians. And other than that, it was some very minor wording differences, but the policy itself, the meaning of the policy is not being changed. Just look for a thumbs up from the administration if that summarizes everything. Thank you. And then are there any questions regarding the redesignation of those two policies and the minor changes that we're looking to make to what will be IHAMB teaching about tobacco, alcohol, and drugs from any of the members? Seeing none, thank you. Since next we would have the special education team facilitator job description. So before we go there, I think I'll try to deal with all of the policies as they were just discussed in one motion. Does any member would like me to actually separate any of the policies, or is it okay as a consent to do all of them at once? Okay, I don't see anybody raising your hand. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion to approve all of the policies from the subcommittee as I had just summarized. And I'm going to put it up to a roll call vote. Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Withers.
Yes.
Ms. Porto.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
Yes.
Mr. Geddes.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
And Mr. Storrs, yes. All those policies are, and the redesignations are approved. Next, we had a motion coming forward unanimously to approve a proposed special education team facilitator job description. I'll let the administration speak to that, please. Maybe that's a good one from the singer.
Sorry.
Oh, all good.
So the team facilitator job description was put through the HR council of the lab and moved up to the lab board for approval. There were multiple staff along with Yvonne who helped to create that job description. This team facilitator was known as team chairs. We changed the name to team facilitator. And so we are submitting this for your approval.
Okay, thank you. So the job description has been provided to the members. So again, this was voted out unanimously from the subcommittee and it's going up for approval. So I will put it up to a roll call vote. Is there any further discussion regarding the special education team facilitator job description? Seeing none. Mr. Storrs, yes. Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
And Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The job description is approved. Couple last items that we discussed during the meeting. As everybody is fully aware, over the last 4 years, a significant amount of time and effort has gone into doing a full policy binder review. As I think everybody here knows, we're talking hundreds of different policies that we have to guide the administration in the running of the schools. And between Ms. Singer, Ms. Regan, and committee members over those 4 years, 5 years now, almost, I want to thank everybody, especially the administration. We're pretty much finally at a point where we can say that we have looked at every single policy Again, took a long time, but we're there. We're now to the point where we are doing a 3-year continuous cycle on all of our policies, and we will continue to do that. Moving forward, the focus is going to be on a couple of different things, from positions and as well as the procedures themselves. We may be looking at a procedure from here to there that has to do with the policies that we have in place. So the administration had come to us and said at this point they have a lot of work that they have to do between the meetings, and 1-month meetings is a little tight with some of the work that they're doing. So we are looking to modify so the frequency in which we're meeting for the policy subcommittee to every other month. Now, that does not mean that there might not be times where we need to meet more frequently. So as needed, we will add additional, but per the subcommittee schedule that we approved earlier, we're going to every other month to allow Ms. Singer and Ms. Regan to do the work that they need to do. Is there anything further that either of you would like to speak to?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the reasoning for the every other month. When Mr. Storrs mentioned we had other things to work on, the next big lift is our job descriptions. Many are extremely outdated, not just AEA positions, but just district-wide positions. And so the collaboration on job descriptions is significant, trying to get people who together to really work on them. And so that's why we felt a little bit more time in between meetings was going to be helpful from that perspective. So I just wanted to clarify what we will be working on and why it was going to be a little more time consuming.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Singer. So again, there will be significant work as we move forward, and we will be continuing with the 3-year review cycle in dealing with new policies from MASC or as needed. And again, I do encourage any member of the committee, if there's a policy that you want the subcommittee to take a look at, please let me know. I'll work with the administration to add it to a future agenda. The last thing that we did discuss during the meeting, I'm going to let the administration speak to it briefly, had to do with parent engagement and the half-day parent conferences. Ms. Regan, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Storrs. So this was around our proposed district events calendar. And so as you can imagine, the events calendar from this year, many of the events on there the dates were changed, or some of them just didn't happen at all. And the same thing, we're looking towards making sure that the start of the school year for, in particular, kindergarten and preschool, that there's enough time to screen all of our students before they enter the building. And so we're looking at dates specifically around that, but then also increasing our parent engagement and looking to have a half day for middle school parent conferences. And so that is part of our agenda for tomorrow evening at the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee meeting. So we'll have a continued conversation tomorrow evening as well.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Regan, for the summary. So again, that'll be coming, I believe, to the full committee in a future meeting. So that was pretty much everything that was part of the June 1st meeting. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Storrs. Last on our agenda, we have open forum. This time I'll open forum. However, I see no attendees at the meeting who could participate, so I'll close open forum and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
No.